Hello, everyone. My name is Aris Mazarakis, and I used to be a language school owner and a teacher, of course. Now, until a few years. Now I'm just a teacher and a pensioner. Now, teaching online has gained a lot of popularity in recent years, mainly because applications such as Skype or Zoom or FaceTime have worked miracles and enable people to participate in online learning. Now, the recent lockdown made it even more urgent because it was the only way teachers could keep up with their students and students could keep up with their learning. However, 10 years ago, when I started using the internet for the purposes of teaching, the case was not like that. It was a lot more difficult. Nowadays, things are different. My son lives in London and his tutor of Polish lives in New York. So twice a week, they connect on Skype and they have a decent lesson. And a couple of years ago, we were in England, stayed there for 8 months, and I could keep up with my B2 level, former lower level students who lived in a little village in Greece. However, the first time I thought I could get involved in online teaching via Skype, the case was not that. It all started 10 years ago when we were on holiday in a little village in the south of Chania in Crete. We met a couple who lived there and they had 2 children. The parents both lost their jobs because of the recession. And unfortunately, they could not send their daughter, the elder one, 8 years old, to the local language school. So without thinking very much, I undertook the challenge to teach her on Skype. At the time, I had no idea what I was letting myself in, because the first enthusiasm turned into a nightmare, mainly because at the time, the internet was not the same. So the speeds, internet speeds were quite low, and many times it stopped. So anyway, the first problem I had to tackle was to equip my computer with a camera which could allow Zoe, let's call her Zoe, a better view, not only of me in front of her screen, but also the surroundings, and most importantly, a whiteboard which I had placed somewhere near me. The whiteboard was an idea which turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because it proved handy in more than one situation. Now, the second thing was, which was also critical, was the choice of teaching material. Now, at the time, the course books we taught at school were quite sophisticated. They had a lot of interactive material, but this material could not be used to teach Zoe, mainly because she had no access to interactive material. Her computer was slow and could not upload it. But even if I could upload it on my own computer and let her look at it in the interactive board, it would be difficult for her to follow. So what I did was choose another course book, more traditional. And I went back to the 90s and chose a book we used to teach at the school at the time, Boomerang. Boomerang was something I knew very well because I had been teaching it for years. And I had even supplemented with lots of reading material. As course books for juniors were lacking in reading material, which for me is the most important source of input, especially for lower classes, junior classes. So I photocopied all the material, the extra material, found a couple of books, sent them over to her in Chania, and then I was faced with another problem. Before starting the first lesson, I realized that it was impossible to use the lesson plans of the teacher's book, mainly because the pace on internet would be the same, as there was no direct contact with the student, and I could not clearly explain everything, and I had to go back and revise things and keep saying the same things again and again. Bear in mind, she was a junior beginner, had never had any other contact with English before. So what I did was I wrote my own lesson plans, 180 of them for the first 2 years. Each one of them took me about 1 hour to prepare and then test them. And having done all these, we were ready for the first lesson. So I concentrated and put within easy reach a number of material which might prove handy throughout the teaching, such as finger puppets, colorful markers, stickers, posters, which would help in each lesson. But before starting, I even had to do another thing which I thought was necessary. This was to turn Zoe into an autonomous learner. She had to pick up some skills which are unlikely for her age, such as using a CD player, because she had to learn how to use the CD player during the hour, the teaching hour. Otherwise, it would mean having a mother or a father sitting next to her, and the lesson would be totally different. Now, that didn't prove to be very difficult for Zoe, because she picked up these new skills quite quickly. And we started. The first 10 lessons, during the first 10 lessons, we had both of us to get used to the procedure. So after the first lesson with greetings and asking about ages and asking about names and hellos, the whole thing was quite apprehensive. She was looking at me in the screen apprehensively. She didn't know what she was supposed to do. And these took at least 10 lessons to learn our way around the lesson. Now, the greatest problem was the internet speed. And many times there were interruptions. The internet broke down and we had to finish a lesson on the telephone many times. But it seems that Zoe was determined and eager to learn, and she kept trying. And that was encouraging for me too. Now, later on, during the first months, after the first months, I realized that she could do more than I thought. So she was picking up language quite quickly, and that encouraged me, and I started feeding her with new things, such as conversations. The conversations I had written in small strips. I put them up with blue tack on the board. She looked at them. Sometimes she had to copy them. And then we both read them out or acted them out. Little by little, I realized that a well-prepared lesson was everything that was needed. Had I not prepared the lessons beforehand, had I not have my own lesson plans in front of me, that would have been a lot more difficult. The lessons were mostly in English. However, sometimes I had to explain things in Greek, especially until she picked up what we call interactive language and transactional language, which means opening books, turning to page 10, close books, open a workbook, and copy these in your book, etc. Now, by Christmas, she was able to talk about the things about herself, about the things she had in her book, in her room, about the things she liked. And that was quite an encouragement for her, for me too. However, the main disadvantage was the lack of peers. In a classroom of 8, 10 people, you can have people working in pairs. You can have people standing up, moving around. But when you teach an 8-year-old on Skype, the only peer she's got is you. So you have to act out as if you were her peer. So that was one of the problems. The second problem is when you teach 8-year-olds, they get restless. I mean, in a class, when you've got 10 people, you don't keep them pinned on their chairs for an hour or even more. You allow them every 10 minutes to take a break by making them stand up, ask each other, do some kind of pair work, so they blow off some steam and they get refreshed to start again. However, this, when you've got a student on your screen, is not possible. What you've got to do then, and I realized it quite quickly, thank God, was to vary your activities. So you vary your activities as to avoid boredom. You can't have a student doing a writing session and for 10 minutes, and after that having them with a reading session. They have to do different things. Now, the first 2 years were difficult. After that, after the first 2 years, she had picked up a framework of vocabulary, and she picked up grammatical reference, and it was easier for her. So things changed after the first 2 years. And instead of having little conversations, we had passages, reading passages. Actually, at the end of the first year, she was able to read a text as long as a page. And that was the main course, the source of input. And then we could discuss about it. Later on, it was substituted. I no longer had to make lesson plans, and I picked a book with a detailed teacher's book, which I could use, and thank God that saved me a lot of time. Zoe also learned how to search the web, and that proved very useful for information which concerned her projects. Now, what happened with the projects? The projects she prepared were sent to me via email or on computer. When she was 10, she even started typing things, which was very useful because she could type them and her mom sent them over by email to me. And I could correct them and send them back for feedback. Now, Zoe followed a course of 8 years. And in those 8 years, it was, there were moments of tension. There were moments of desperation when I thought I was not offering anything to her. However, last year, she took her proficiency exam, ECPE, Michigan examination, and she excelled. And that was the best reward for me, but even for her. Now, let's see a few things, a few basic things. Let's put it all together. Let's see what's coming out of this case, from this personal experience. First of all, Technology is engaging, and children love using gadgets. Most of them have got mobiles nowadays, and they use them to communicate, but they also prepare amazing things. My 8-year-old granddaughter can make videos which she uploads live streaming, etc. It is convenient teaching a child on the internet because children don't have to move out of their home. Most parents are reluctant to ask to take children out of their home to language schools. Finally, Skype and Skype teaching, online teaching, is the last resource if classroom learning is not possible. That is the case with the recent coronavirus epidemic. However, the internet is not panacea. Children get easily bored. They can't remain seated for far too long. They have to get involved in activities which will make for this lack of movement. Another thing is the lack of physical contact. Children need to be with other children. They need competition. The classroom is the perfect field where they can count how much they know, how much they can do. They measure themselves against their friends. Another problem is, even if technology has improved greatly in the last 10 years, still problems exist. I was having a conversation with a friend a few minutes ago who said that his internet connection collapsed suddenly and he couldn't keep up with the talk. Especially in places, faraway places, villages, internet speeds can be quite low. The lessons are demanding for teacher. The recent epidemic taught us who try to keep up with teaching with younger levels or upper levels, that it's a lot more demanding for teachers. You don't have to cope only with the material you want to teach. You have to cope with students who are unwilling to learn, students who will switch off their screen and do whatever they like, and they fail to keep up with the others. Online teaching demands detailed preparation, and it's not suitable for all children. For example, Zoe's sister, who I tried to teach in the same way, didn't keep up. I mean, she dropped out very quickly. She couldn't do it simply because it was not fit for her. Also, it's difficult for classes. So how can you possibly teach a class of 5 or 6 or 10, 80-year-olds altogether? Will they all keep up? Will they all pick up what you teach them? How would you know that some of them were not paying attention? What about parents? Do they have to be next to their children to make sure they don't do anything else? Sometimes many colleagues said that during the recent epidemic, they had an unpleasant experience. Parents caught their children sending messages on their mobile to each other, making fun of the teacher. So these are all considerations. Another consideration is the choice of the course book. So what do you teach them? Nowadays, thank God, you can upload everything on your interactive board and send it over to them and use it at the time of teaching. But even if you don't have a whiteboard and this an interactive board, even if you're teaching coaching, actually, you can use an interactive whiteboard and use the traditional way to teach them. Flashcards, posters, realia for junior classes, a collection of cartoons or anything. Also, the use of internet. There are some sites with children's rhymes and songs. One of them is Noisy Crow. Noisy Crow is amazing. It's got songs most children love. So you can vary both the pace of a lesson, but also give them a break by asking them to listen to some song, and they also have the lyrics, which they can use. What about reading? Reading is a problem, not only for online teaching. Reading is a problem for all junior classes because most course books sorely lack reading material. I don't mean the reading which is in the form of a conversation, in which they read a conversation which focuses on the teaching of a grammatical structure or of a function. I mean extensive reading. What I've always done was to turn the strip cartoon listenings, which exist in every book, into extensive reading passages. Reading is important, especially, more specifically, on online teaching. Why? Because it's the source of input. In reading passages, they will see the grammar you have taught them, the vocabulary you have taught them. They will be able to see how it works. What about writing? Now, with Zoe, writing was always a problem. At first, I thought it was my mistake. I was doing something wrong, but it was not. It proved out the very late levels I taught her that she despised writing. She despised writing. She didn't want to write. She took the proficiency examination writing only no more than 5 or 6 compositions, no more essays. She knew the difference between the essays. She hated writing. Now, in earlier levels, she wrote things which she sent me by email, how her mother copied it with a camera, uploaded it, sent it over to me. I downloaded it, made the editing, sent it back to her. Complicated, yes, but it was the only way. Listening and speaking were not an actual problem because she had all the listenings in the CD, and the speaking came easier, more easily later on. The problem was grammar and vocabulary. Grammar is a problem, especially at earlier levels, because she got to see the grammatical structure being used. This was achieved with strips, with language, which I put up in the whiteboard behind me, and I went through them teaching the grammar or revising grammar. Finally, some useful tips if you are determined to do it. If you're determined to do it, you should adopt a learner-centered approach. It's not what you want to do, it's what they can do and what it is possible to do. Sometimes it's not possible to teach as much as you want. Sometimes you have to get rid of your lesson plan. And in that case, it's a good idea to have a plan B ready at any time. Also, it's a good idea to have a plan B in case the internet collapses. What do you do then? Do you stop the lesson? Do you go back another day? Do you continue it? In the case of Zoe, many was the time we finished the lesson on the telephone. But she was determined not to let go. Another thing which is important if you want to endeavor with junior beginners is clear and feasible aims. You have to have clear aims. You have to be clear about what you want to teach in each session. And the student has to know that at the end of each lesson, what you have taught them has what we call surrender value. Surrender value is using the language you taught them in the lesson to do something with the language, to solve language problems. So if you're teaching the verb to be in the first person, she has to be able to use it to talk about herself. In the third person, the copula, she has to be able to use it to talk about her father, her mother, her sister, or a friend. Another precondition is consistency. Consistency means you have to be consistent with your aims and with the times of teaching. You can't postpone lessons. You can't let go. If you do that, you lost the first battle. She's got to be there, or the student has to be there, the teacher has to be there at a certain time, which has been prearranged. You can't let go of lessons, and there should be discipline. The student has to know that this is not a time of game, because that's what they think whenever they deal with gadgets and applications. They think it's a game, but it's not. It's a lesson. So I think that's all I had to do, say to you. We've got another 5 minutes to see if there are any queries. I can see some of them. I have a student who hates writing. Now, if a student hates writing, start from the basics, which is do it like a game. An activity which can work miracles for the beginning is having a text in stripes, send it over to them by email or put it up on your whiteboard and tell them to rearrange the different parts. Then ask them to write something similar or to copy what they have managed to put in the right order. Any other questions? Level? Do you teach, do you teach junior level now? And if so, what have you changed in your methodology? No, I don't teach junior levels now. And in class, I've always tried to treat juniors like adults. If you treat them like equals, they understand you mean business. And the teacher has to be friendly, but not a friend with the students. You have to keep your distance in order to do your job. How about dictation? That's a good question. Dictation. You will never be able to be certain that what you dictate is what they write, or they don't look the words up somewhere. No, we didn't do dictation, never. So, hold on. Any suggestions for break activities during a lesson for a ADHD student? What do you mean by ADHD, Maria? Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you very much. You've been very responsive. Bye.